Hey, it's Coach Kyra, and today I'm here to talk to you about your resistance training. Now, this is going to be the complete guide to resistance training starting from start to finish. So please forgive me if this video runs a little bit long, but I want to ensure that you have everything that you need for your resistance training to be enjoyable, effective, and efficient as you pursue your goals. So stay tuned, grab your popcorn, don't maybe grab some skinny pop, I don't know. Grab your popcorn and stay tuned for Resistance 101. So why do we resistance train? Resistance training is anything that requires gravity to complete. For example, this is resistance, or using a resistance band can be resistance. Your body weight can be resistance. Resistance training is not limited to using dumbbells or bars in order to complete your goal, okay? But resistance training is important, and it's super important for a few different reasons. One is obviously related to our physique goals. Resistance training is the fastest and most direct pathway to reach your physique goals. One, because it increases your metabolism. As you're expending energy, you're asking your body to burn calories to make you more expensive to keep alive. That's a good thing for a physique goal. Resistance training is also important because of the long-term impacts to your metabolism. Adding muscle adds metabolically active tissue to your frame. Essentially, having biceps gives your body something else to focus on rather than building body fat, okay? Having this metabolically active tissue keeps your metabolism high, makes your body more expensive to keep alive, and therefore keeps that weight management nice and easy to maintain, okay? Additionally, resistance training is one of the ways that we expose ourselves to longevity of agility and mobility and flexibility and strength, right? This is how we stay strong for long and age well as we move forward in life, okay? So definitely pay attention as we walk through this video. Why resistance training, and now how? First, we want to start with why we're resistance training, okay? Obviously, we have physique-related goals, and for many people, this will be why you start to introduce resistance training to your life, okay? It'll be something you do forever. Now, with that, as we're pursuing these physique goals, we need to have SMART goals, even within our resistance training. Is it to do more push-ups? Is it to have a deeper squat, increase your mobility, increase your stamina? We need to ensure that we're having goals that we're focused on as we pursue these goals. Our app has the tracking functionality to keep progress over time, okay? So make sure that you're telling me how difficult your workouts were, what you enjoyed, what you didn't like as you're working on this in our training app. Now, let's talk about the how of resistance training. We have compound exercises, we have isolation exercises, but we also have functional movements. And let me explain the difference between all three. Let's start with functional movements. Functional movements are the movements that are necessary for the overall function of your life. For example, reaching up and over your head, pulling things towards your body or pushing things away from your body, squatting, lunging are all functional movement patterns. And this is also where we get our compound movements. Let me show you. Our functional movements include squatting, hinging, lifting, carrying, pushing, pressing. These are all functional movements. And our compound movements that we do in our resistance training mimic these functional movements. For example, a compound movement might be something like a squat, okay? Compound movements might also be something like a hinge in the form of a deadlift. A compound movement might also be something in the form of an overhead press or a row, okay? These are compound movements, and they're movements that we'll use to exaggerate or to produce different reactions in your body for overall wellness, overall fitness, and for your overall physique goals. You might also find, as we're building up your resistance training library, if you will, that we do also add in isolation movements. For example, this is a pulling movement, but only with a single joint. Now, a pulling movement with multiple joints, like a row, includes both my shoulders and my elbows, and it's hinging at my hips. A leg extension, right, is a single leg movement, whereas a squat, or an isolation movement, whereas a squat is a multi-joint movement, okay? Those are the main differences between compound movements, isolation movements, and functionality. Proper resistance training is focused on load, and load is informed by our sets, reps, and total volume, including our weights, okay? As we are resistance training, we're asking our bodies to change. We're asking them to adapt, whether it's to adapt in terms of stability, right? You might think about core stability, being able to keep yourself upright or keep yourself from falling over. We might ask our bodies to adapt in terms of strength, total strength. How much can I move in one specific setting? How much can I deadlift? What's my 1 rep max for a deadlift or a squat? Or we might ask our muscles or our bodies to hypertrophy, change in size, okay? So when we do these things, we're specifically asking our body to make adaptations, and we need varying loads to get those adaptations. Load, sets, reps, weight, okay? As we are producing these adaptations, the body continually needs progressive overload. That is the continual pursuing of more and more load. Now, you might think, well, geez, coach, I only have 5-pound deadlift, 5-pound weights at home. Do I need to work to add more and more and more weights to my home gym in order to reach progressive overload? Do I need 5s and 10s and 20s and 30s all the way up into oblivion until I reach progressive overload? No. And let me show you how here are some of the ways that we might reach progressive overload inside and outside of the gym. One is rate of perceived exertion. At the end of every workout, you'll notice that I ask you to tell me how difficult your workout was or your RPE. For example, let's take this kettlebell. With this kettlebell, if I'm just swinging like this, right, gradually kind of keeping it nice and easy, not really applying much force or much effort to this, my rate of perceived exertion, completing maybe a set of 20 of these, my rate of perceived exertion is probably something like a 2. This is not very difficult. However, if I were to take this kettlebell and I were to actively engage my core, push power through my glutes, and extend it overhead like this, I wonder how many of those I'd be able to complete. The rate of perceived exertion might be different based on the amount of effort that I give my training. Now, rate of perceived exertion is measuring intensity of our exercise, and we need our intensity to generally be high. With this, we want for our intensity to rest somewhere between a 7 and a 10 every time we complete our workouts. In week 1 of your new training program, maybe it's just a 7 or sometimes even a 6 as you're getting started with a new training program. But as you increase your understanding of the training program, these blocks that we create, these 4 to 8 week blocks of training that we create together, as you increase your understanding and your body starts to learn what we're doing, we increase progressive overload by increasing the rate of perceived exertion or applying more intensity to our efforts. Let me explain. Let's use this band, for example. At the very end of this band, doing these banded pull-aparts, this movement is not very intense. I'm also going pretty quickly. I'm not really focused on the contraction. I'm not really focused on having my muscles awaken through this movement. Now, there are a couple of ways that I can improve the intensity of this movement. I could bring my hands closer together. Now I can barely pull this apart. This is really intense, okay? So just for the sake of this video, I'm gonna extend my hands out a little bit more, okay? So I can extend, or I could bring my hands in to make this a lot more difficult to pull apart, okay? What I could also do is slow down. What I could also do is milk my reps, hold the contraction, and milk the stretch, okay? I wonder how many of these, specifically about this height, how many of these would I actually be able to do? I think I got a good 4 in here. Right? So when we think about improving, that burns. When we think about improving our intensity, it's easy to increase your rate of perceived exertion simply by manipulating your hand placement, your speed, your pausing, your contractions, and your stretch. Let me explain a little bit more. Using our kettlebell, let me show you some more ways to improve your rate of perceived exertion. Now, we were working on a hinging pattern with the kettlebell, okay? So let's just call this a kettlebell deadlift. I'm gonna hinge at my hips, bend at the knees, and allow my hips to shoot back as if I'm closing a car door, okay? Now, going just like this, kettlebell deadlift, going nice and fast, right? Not really feeling too crazy. I could probably end up doing 20 of these before it got difficult. That means my rate of perceived exertion, something like a 3, not very hard. Here's how you can make it harder. With your kettlebell, you slow down the release. Slowly, maybe to a count of 4. You pause in the stretched position, and then you come up for a count of 2 and go right back into it. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, up, and right on back down. So I'm not giving my muscles an opportunity to relax. I'm not giving my glutes or hamstrings an opportunity to catch their breath here. And this is picking up the intensity. We're thinking about something called mechanical tension, time under tension as we're doing something like this. Time under tension helps to improve our rate of perceived exertion, and that our bodies are literally spending exaggerated time in this stretched position. And the stretched position is the position where muscle growth happens so much more, okay? If you're going to exaggerate any position for increase in your RPE, let it be the stretch. Now, when thinking about the stretched position, okay? When thinking about the stretch, we want to think about isometric, concentric, and eccentric contractions of the muscle, okay? Let's just use this band for example. I'm going to do a banded bicep curl, okay? With this is the isometric position of my banded bicep curl, okay? The curling of my arm toward my body is the concentric, and the release downward is the eccentric. Con with, eke away, right? Iso, hold. With this, as we're doing our resistance training, it's important for us to focus on concentric tension, isometric tension, and eccentric control. So if you're doing, let's use our kettlebell again. If we're doing kettlebell curls, what I don't want to see is, right, just kind of throwing the weight around. I also don't want to see a nice slow concentric up and a drop down, a slow concentric up and a drop down. What I need to see is a nice and controlled concentric and a nice and controlled eccentric on the way down, okay? This is how we get the types of results that we want. So let's walk through some of the major compound lifts or functional compound movements and how you can perform proper form while doing these. First, easiest, most functional is the squat. For your squat, this is 1000% determined by you and your anatomy. So let me set you free. When it comes to your squat, please don't think because you see somebody perfectly squatting with their knees perfectly straight and their legs perfectly engaged, just because you see someone squatting in that way, does that mean that your body squats that way? There are multiple reasons why your body might squat differently from what you see online. The major reason that we see is ankle flexion. You simply don't have the mobility in your ankles to have a straight up and down, butt to grass squat. So if I show you my squat in what should be a perfect squat, legs perfectly forward, perfectly hips apart, knees perfectly straight, toes perfectly straight, that's my squat. That. And that's my squat because as you can see, I don't have the ankle flexion. So how does my body compensate when it's time for me to do a squat if I don't have the ankle flexion for what would be a normal and perfect squat? My body requires my legs to be much further apart and for my toes to turn outward in order to achieve the depth of my squat, okay? Here we go. Deep, squat, easy. Now, I can prove that it's ankle flexion that's keeping me from being able to get a normal squat. Let me show you. I just showed you that if my hips were perfectly square, knees, toes square, I just showed you that this was my squat in this is it. That's my squat in this position. Now, I know this is ankle flexion. Again, my squat. I know that's ankle flexion because if I remove ankle flexion as the barrier to entry here, look at my squat now. In simply standing on my toes, I have the full depth of what would be a normal squat. So ankle flexion is a problem for me. That doesn't make this squat wrong. That just makes how my body needs to adapt in order to get the squat different for me. Some other things that might be difficult when you're squatting are your lower back or glutes might be tight or disengaged. For example, if when you squat, your squat does this, right? We can automatically assume that your core is not engaged and your glutes are not on. If I squeeze my butt and if I turn my core on, automatically that's pulling me upright, right? So you think, I'm just gonna go back on my toes for perfect squat form, right? I'm here in this position, everything's off. I can kind of bend forward, lean forward way too far, okay? But if I turn my core on, squeeze my glutes, I can now have a nearly perfect squat position, okay? The squat. It's completely up to you and your anatomy. So do not fret when you hear people talking about squats or you see different squats on the internet. Your body's squat will be your body's squat, okay? The few things that I want you paying attention to are, I don't want your knees caving inward when you squat. We don't want that. I don't want you wobbling and destabilized when you squat. We don't want that. And as best you possibly can, I want you to try to avoid this forward bend, right? It's kind of tabletop squat. And if you need some specific help with that, that's why I'm here. Now, my phone has overheated, so I'm going to have to stop this video. However, I hope that what you've learned so far has been helpful for you. And I wanted to end on this last note about injury prevention. Preventing injuries in the gym starts with your warm-up. Every one of us has a 5 to 10 minute cardiovascular warm-up to get some blood flowing and get the muscles loose before we start to use them. Do not skip your cardio warm-up, please. Make sure that they happen every time you see them scheduled. With that, you also have some mobility work at the beginning of your workout. So like we mentioned with the squat, if you know that you have some ankle mobility issues, as you're warming up to do your squat, doing your ankle mobility is certainly important. Your hip mobility is certainly important as you're preparing to do your squat. So do not skip mobility. And then your core stabilizes the whole system. Can you imagine going into an 18-story apartment building or office building and it didn't have the foundation to keep you straight and upright? The same thing is true for our core. Your core is what's designed to keep you stabilized. And so when you're doing your planks or you're doing your V-ups or you're doing your Russian twists or whatever it is that you're doing at the beginning of your training session for your core, do that, because we're activating all of these neurological pathways to ensure that when you get to your resistance training program, you have all of the foundation that you need to get through it without getting hurt, okay? That's step one. Step two is cooling down afterward. Now, if you want to take a few minutes to stretch, 5 or so minutes is more than enough to kind of stretch out, move your body, cool it down just a little bit in order to wind down from the amount of work that you were doing. But I think the third and most important piece is going to be the amount of work that you do. Please do not think that with your resistance training program, it's a good idea to pack on 3 of your training programs in one session because you missed them throughout the week. If you missed it, you missed it. That's okay. That's the beauty of treating this like a lifestyle, okay? We do not want to overload your musculature, your skeletal system with too much load and not be able to recover. And recovery, number 4, is so important. Space in between your training sessions, time in between your training sessions, adequate sleep, adequate nutrition, including protein and carbohydrates, adequate hydration, adequate supplementation if that's something that's necessary for you, mindset, relaxation, coming down from a very stressful day are all ways that you can focus on recovery and give your body what it needs to stay in this homeostatic zone, okay? We want to approach resistance training for all of the wonderful benefits that it gives us without the risk of getting hurt. I hope this was helpful for you. I'm sorry that I have to end this video a little bit early, but I do hope this was helpful. And if you have any additional questions about resistance training, specifically the form videos for the compound movements or the isolation movements that I was not able to get to in this video series, please stay tuned. I plan to finish this video. Stay tuned and I'll let you know when it's ready for your review. But I hope this was helpful and happy training.